show a process that goes by a few different names. Deconstructed silkscreen is one, and breakdown printing is the other. And it comes out of a technique called polychromatic silkscreen. And polychromatic silkscreen is a technique where you draw with textile dye directly onto the screen, and you let the little dye particles dry, and then you print through that with clear print paste onto textiles, and you get like 4 or 5 prints that are very similar to each other. It's just like it starts stronger and then it fades as you print. And then breakdown printing is a process where you kind of take that idea of painting dye onto a screen, but you push it a little bit further by adding viscosity resist to it. So you actually make like a thick print paste and you print that onto your screen, and then let that dry and print through that with colored print paste. So I'm just gonna start from the very beginning and I'm gonna make some print paste. First, actually, I wear a dust mask just because if I sneezed and like breathed the stuff in, it would be kind of uncomfortable. But it's not anything anyone who isn't like right near it needs to worry about. I have 4 cups of hot water. And I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of soda ash. That's my fixative. And then I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of urea. Urea keeps it's a humectant. It keeps the dye from drying out too quickly, and it helps in the setting process, because one of the things that you need for the dye to really stick to the cotton is moisture. So the warm water helps it dissolve pretty quickly, but the temperature doesn't actually matter chemically at this point. Now I'm going to make it thick using sodium alginate, and this is actually a product that is used in food also. Sometimes at this point it needs some help because it's thick, so the blender can't really get it all the way. So right now this is water, the fixatives, that's like what will bond the dye to the cotton, and the humectant that'll keep the moisture on the dye particles when it's curing, after I'm printed. So see, it's like, I guess you could say that's like honey, maybe? It's a little thicker. But you can see by the way it's dropping that it's not crazy thick, but it's definitely got some body to it. And I wear gloves because this stuff will really dry out my skin. And once I add dye to it, it's like impossible to wash dye out of your hands. So it's easier to just be protected. Same with the sleeves. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a little bit of dye. Get some more water. I put a small amount of water into my mixing container, and then I get out my powdered dyes. And these are the same kind of dyes that you would use if you're doing tie-dye. They're cold water dyes, which is sort of a misnomer because they still do require heat to set to the fabric, but it's a low temperature. It's like, I don't know, 75 degrees is an ideal temperature. But that's still warmer than a house in New England, so you do have to like think about the temperature when you're fixing your fabric. It's just a lot colder than some other kinds of dye that you have to be boiling practically. That's why it's called cold. I'm gonna mix like an orange, I think. And I usually try to remember to put the water in first, because that way when I like dump my powder in there, it has something to grab onto, instead of kind of like flying out of the container. And the color will change a little bit, like when it attaches to the textiles, but I can get a pretty good sense just by painting some of it onto a piece of paper. So that's 1 part fuchsia, 1 part scarlet, and 2 parts acid yellow. It's kind of like a little bit like TV blood. I think I'll add some more yellow.
Does it keep?
In this state, it will keep. I've read that it will keep for like 10 days. I haven't tested that. But once I mix it with my print paste, since I put my fixative in there, I really have about 24 hours with it.
Okay. It's fascinating.
Okay, so this I like. This is more yellow. Now I'm going to put some of this print paste into my dye. I try to get it to be a pretty uniform texture, although it'll also sort of like get more uniform if I just leave it alone.
What kind of consistency are you looking for?
I like it, well, I've experimented with different thicknesses, and I like it sort of like this is still pretty like loose, and I think it's easier to print. If it's too thick, I have to do like many pulls to get it to go through the silkscreen. And a hunch that I have is that if I experimented with different meshes, I might be able to use fewer pulls, but I haven't done that yet. So I'll show you what my next step would be, which is to make a step. I'm going to make a stencil with this print paste. So this is something that I made yesterday. I just used this paintbrush to draw onto the open stencil. And it's pretty easy to work with since I can control the viscosity. Right?
So the letters are what we'll be printing.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's a little more weird than that. I'll just show you. They will print, but they also won't print.
It's very existential.
Okay, so here's my stencil. It'll be ready in like an hour or two. I can blow a fan on it to make it go faster. I can put a lot of paint on there and let it drip, or put kind of a lighter application and get a different effect. But just to show you kind of like how this other thing is made, right? This won't be ready, but. And since I'm only going to print this particular screen a limited number of times, a newsprint stencil is fine. It'll hold up. It's great for this purpose. So no need to like splurge on wax paper.
That's a good point.
Yeah. The other thing about this is that once I get some dye into my screen, the dye will hold this newsprint stencil against the screen. So I don't have to like tape it that well. I just have to tape it well enough to get it into place. The first couple times I print, what I'm going to get is all this like negative space will be my print paste color red, and the painted on stencil will be blocked out, as will the newsprint. And then over time, the newsprint will stay the same, but this stuff will start to break down. So I'm gonna clear things out because once I get the screen wet, the process starts. It's not, I don't have to be like super fast, but time is like part of what's happening with the breaking down.
What mesh do you use for this?
I'm actually not sure what these are. These are loaner screens. So
Are they the studios?
they are.
I think it's 25.
That looks tasty. Looks like cranberry sauce.
You must be hungry. And I'm gonna use my bigger squeegee because I want to be able to like get the whole image in one go. Half as many pulls then. So it actually started breaking down like right away.
Yeah,
right? Getting some of that like darker color in the letters.
But the wrinkles in the t-shirt make a printing
They
problem.
do, yeah. They're gonna make the image different, like a relief, basically. I think is
Oh, I see.
how you could explain what happens.
So fast.
Yeah. So here looks like a little wrinkle.
Yeah, that kind of adds to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like this is terrible silkscreen technique. If I was trying to make posters or something, it wouldn't be good.
Do you normally not use the?
I started out using the press, like using those clamps.
Yeah, that's good.
But it wasn't good for me because then your screen is locked into this position. And I like to be able to move my stencil all over the place and like use it wherever.
Right, because the hinge, like the top of the t-shirt, would
Yeah.
get in the way of the hinge.
Right.
Wow, the color's really rich.
And so I guess other things to look at and think about like how it affects the image is this, what I'm seeing is like uneven pressure also, right? Like this side got less pressure than this side, and that's why the less print paste went through, so it's just sitting on the top layer of the t-shirt, and it's going to give a texture instead of like a fully saturated area for here. And if I used a different kind of fabric, like I was printing on muslin before I started making t-shirts, and the muslin doesn't have this texture really. I think it's smoother, at least the kind that I had. So if there was like not enough dye in one area, it didn't look like this. You know, this is intrinsic. This is like the texture of the t-shirt, like how a paper has like a fiber, like the way that it is.